I never thought a single dinner could ruin a life. Yet as I stood in my apartment that night, staring at the blinking cursor on my phone, the one that said, "Message failed to send," I realized how fragile everything really was. My name is Ava Carter, 34 years old, senior project manager at a digital marketing firm in downtown Chicago. Married to Ethan for 8 years, a man with quiet eyes and a love for Sunday pancakes. We were stable, maybe even enviable, the couple our friends pointed to and said, "That's what I want someday." But stability has a way of masking distance. It started innocently enough. My boss, Ryan Hale, had asked if I could join him for dinner to discuss a major client pitch. We'd been working on the campaign for weeks, and the final presentation was due the next morning. The office was chaos. Designers rushing, interns printing, caffeine replacing sleep. Ryan was the kind of man who demanded perfection but rewarded it generously. "Dinner," he'd said, leaning against my office doorway. "Not fancy, just a quiet place to go over the pitch deck." I hesitated. Ethan had been distant lately, always tired, always busy. I couldn't remember the last time we'd shared a meal without checking our phones. "Sure," I said finally. "Text me the place." That evening, I put on a navy dress, professional but soft, and met Ryan at a quiet bistro near the river. The restaurant glowed with amber light, the kind that made everything seem warmer than it really was. Ryan was charming, in that practiced way corporate leaders are. Polite, confident, effortlessly attentive. We talked about the campaign, then about life. How he'd burned out in his 20s, how I'd struggled to prove myself in a room full of louder men. There was a moment, brief but real, when I felt seen. Not as a wife, not as an employee, just me. Halfway through dessert, his phone buzzed. He smiled apologetically, took the call, then came back with a grin. "Great news. Clients signed the pre-approval. We're a go for tomorrow." We toasted with our glasses of wine. A colleague from the office, Marcy, happened to walk by and waved, snapping a quick selfie of us laughing. "For the team chat," she'd said. I didn't think much of it. Until later that night, when that same photo found its way to Ethan's phone. When I came home, the apartment was dark, except for the TV flickering silently. Ethan sat on the couch, still in his work clothes, staring at his phone. "Hey," I began softly, placing my bag down. "You're up late." He didn't answer, just turned the screen toward me. It was the photo. Ryan and me, mid-laugh, glasses raised. The kind of picture that looked far too intimate when stripped of context. "Care to explain this?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it, Ava? A business dinner at a candlelit restaurant? You look happy." His voice cracked on that last word. I stepped closer. "Ethan, please. It was just dinner. Work-related. I didn't even know someone took that photo." He stood, ran a hand through his hair. "I've been patient, Ava. I've watched you come home later every night, buried in your phone, always with some urgent project. You think I'm blind?" I felt the anger rising. Not at him, but at the unfairness of it. "You think I'd cheat on you over dinner? You know me better than that." He looked at me for a long, unbearable moment. I thought I did. Then he walked past me, grabbed his jacket, and left. The door slammed, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I sat down on the couch, staring at the photo on his phone. The image mocked me. A single second of joy now twisted into proof of betrayal. I tried calling him. He didn't answer. I texted, "Please come home, let's talk." Nothing. At 2:17 a.m., I realized I was crying without sound. The city outside hummed on. Cars, sirens, the endless neon heartbeat of other people's lives continuing while mine quietly fell apart. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept replaying everything. In my mind, the dinner, the laughter, the photo, Ethan's eyes. How could something so small feel so irreversible? The next morning, I went to work pretending everything was fine. Ryan noticed the tension in my face. "You okay?" he asked as I fumbled through the presentation slides. "Yeah," I lied. But during the pitch, I felt the weight of Ethan's absence like a missing limb. My words were flat, my focus blurred. When it was over, I slipped into the restroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. Tired, hollow, lost. A marriage doesn't end in one night, I told myself. But maybe it begins to crack in the moments you stop being seen. That weekend, Ethan didn't come home. His things were still there. His coffee mug, his running shoes, the scent of his cologne on the pillow. But he was gone. I called his sister. She said he was staying with a friend. She didn't say which one. I left him messages, long and short, angry and pleading, until my voice grew hoarse. When Monday came, I put on my blazer, held my head high, and went to work again. Because that's what you do when your world collapses. You pretend it hasn't. But somewhere deep down I knew. The dinner had changed everything. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind that fills a room, but the kind that seeps into your bones. The absence of someone's energy, their presence, their smell in the air. Ethan's absence echoed in every corner of our apartment. His jacket was gone from the coat rack, his toothbrush missing from the bathroom. Only his wedding ring sat on the nightstand, cold and final, as if it were whispering, "This is where I stopped trying." I stood there staring at it for what felt like hours. I wanted to scream, to throw it, to call him and demand an explanation. But instead I sank onto the bed and whispered into the empty room, "You didn't even let me explain." That was the thing about Ethan. When he was hurt, he didn't fight. He disappeared. Days turned into weeks. At work, I functioned like a machine, deadlines, meetings, numbers. The campaign that had caused all this chaos was a success. Clients congratulated me, Ryan praised me in front of the team, and yet every good job Ava felt hollow. I'd won professionally but lost personally, and no amount of applause could fill that space. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, Ryan caught up to me in the elevator. "Hey, Ava, about the pitch last week." I cut him off gently. "Ryan, I can't talk about work right now." He frowned. "You okay?" I hesitated, then said the truth. My husband left. His expression softened instantly. "Because of the dinner?" I nodded. He sighed. "I'm sorry, Ava. I shouldn't have asked you out that night. It wasn't fair to put you in that position." "It's not your fault," I said automatically. But deep down, I wasn't sure I believed that. That night, I walked home through the drizzle, the city's lights smeared by the rain like watercolor. I passed couples holding hands, laughing over umbrellas. It hit me how invisible you can feel in a crowd, how loneliness can walk beside you like a shadow. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and scrolled through my phone, half hoping Ethan might have texted. Nothing, just a notification from Marcy, the coworker who had taken the infamous photo. Marcy. "Hey, Ava! I'm so sorry if I caused trouble with that pic." I had no idea. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on me. It's fine. Some things were already broken. I put my phone down and stared out the window. Across the street, a couple was arguing, loud enough that I could hear the muffled shouts through the glass. And then suddenly they started laughing. It reminded me of how Ethan and I used to fight, how even in our worst moments, we found a way to laugh until we didn't. A week later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. Ethan's inside was a short letter. "Ava, I need space to think. I don't know what's true anymore, and about us, about what I saw, about how I feel. Please don't contact me for a while. I read it over and over until the words blurred. Not goodbye. Not I'm done. Just space. But space can be the cruelest distance of all. It looks temporary, but it stretches endlessly when you love someone who's no longer reaching back. The days began to bleed into each other. I started running in the mornings, not for fitness, but because movement was the only way to stop thinking. I'd run until my lungs burned, until the city faded behind me, and I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could outrun the ache. At work, Ryan kept his distance, which I appreciated. But one Friday evening, he stopped by my office as everyone else was leaving. Got a minute? I nodded, even though I wanted to disappear. He closed the door softly. Ava, I know things have been rough. I just want you to know I've got your back. If you need time off or anything. His tone was genuine, and I was too tired to be defensive. Thanks, Ryan, I'll be fine. He studied me for a moment. You're not, though. You look like someone carrying too much alone. Something in me broke a little. What else am I supposed to do? He won't even talk to me. Ryan leaned against the desk. Sometimes people run because they're scared of what they might hear. Doesn't mean they've stopped caring. I wanted to believe that. That weekend, I went to visit my mother in Evanston, the one person who never sugar-coated life. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "He's gone, isn't he?" I nodded, and just like that, the tears came. Over tea, I told her everything. The photo, the silence, the letter. She listened quietly, then said, "Men like Ethan love deeply, but they bruise easily. You didn't betray him, but his trust did. That's not fair," I said bitterly. He didn't even ask for the truth, Mom sighed. People don't always want the truth when they're hurting. They want to be right. Her words stung because they were true. That night, I slept in my childhood room, surrounded by old posters and dusty trophies, echoes of a girl who used to dream of love without cracks. I woke up at dawn realizing something. I couldn't wait forever for Ethan to come home. If he did, we'd talk. If he didn't, I'd still survive. It wasn't courage. It was exhaustion that looked like courage. Over the next few weeks, I started rebuilding small pieces of my life. I redecorated the apartment, painted the walls, replaced the curtains, even got a new coffee mug. Ryan noticed the change in me. "You're smiling more lately," he said during a team meeting. "I'm trying to," I replied. Then, one evening as I was leaving the office, I saw Ethan waiting outside. My heart stopped. He looked tired, eyes sunken, beard grown, wearing the same gray coat he'd left in. He held a small envelope in his hand. "Hey," he said softly. For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Then you look different." "So do you." We stood there, awkward and fragile, like two strangers holding the ghost of what we used to be. He handed me the envelope. "Divorce papers," he said quietly. The world tilted. "Ethan," he looked away. "I just can't unsee it, Ava. That picture, that night. It's like something inside me broke." I took a shaky breath. "And what about love? Does that just vanish because of a misunderstanding?" He didn't answer. He just said, "Take care of yourself," and walked away. The papers trembled in my hand as I watched him disappear into the crowd, swallowed by the city that had seen us fall in love, and now fall apart. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat on the couch and whispered, "Maybe this is how it ends," quietly. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered back, "Or maybe it's how you begin again." The silence after signing my name felt louder than any argument Ethan and I ever had. I didn't even sign the papers right away. I just stared at the line where my name should go, the black ink waiting to end what we'd built for almost a decade. In the end, I signed not because I wanted to, but because holding on to someone who'd already let go was its own kind of pain. After that day, the world seemed muted. I still woke up at 6, still made coffee, still went to work. but everything was mechanical, stripped of color. Even music hurt. I couldn't listen to the songs we loved. Every melody was a memory I wasn't ready to relive. There's something cruel about living in a city when your heart is broken. Everywhere you look, people are moving on, falling in love, laughing on sidewalks. It feels like the world is showing off what you've lost. At work, Ryan noticed the shift in me again. "You're quieter lately," he said one morning as I was reviewing reports. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He studied me. "You don't have to be." I looked up at him, and for a brief moment, I saw real concern. Not the polite kind you get from colleagues, but something genuine. That scared me. Because the last thing I needed was another man caring about me when I didn't even know who I was anymore. Weeks passed. I kept my head down, drowning in projects, pretending I was healed. But healing isn't pretending the wound doesn't exist. It's learning to live with the scar. One night, I was walking home from work when it started to snow. The first snow of the season. The city glowed in gold and white, streets shimmering like they'd been dusted with starlight. I stopped for a moment, letting the snow land on my face. For the first time in months, I smiled. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a number I hadn't seen in weeks. Ethan. Ethan. "I left a box for you outside your building. Thought you might want these." I rushed home, heart pounding. Outside my door sat a small cardboard box. Inside were photos, our wedding pictures, old postcards, ticket stubs from trips we'd taken. At the bottom was a note. "I'm sorry it ended this way. I really did love you, Ava. Maybe I still do. But I don't know how to trust what I feel anymore." I sank to the floor, holding that note like it was the last piece of him I had left. I wanted to call him, to say something, anything. But what do you say to someone who loves you and still leaves? So I didn't call. I just sat there, surrounded by ghosts of laughter and vows that no longer mattered. In the following days, I started clearing out the apartment. Not to erase Ethan, but to reclaim the space as my own. I boxed up what reminded me of him and replaced them with small touches of me. I hung paintings, bought a new rug, even changed the curtains to something brighter. Each change was a tiny rebellion against the grief that had settled like dust in the corners of my life. But even as I moved forward, part of me wondered if he was doing the same. Moving on, finding someone else, forgetting me piece by piece. That thought used to crush me. Now it just hurt less. A few weeks later, I attended a networking gala for work. One of those corporate events with champagne, smiles, and small talk that meant nothing. I wore a black dress I hadn't touched since before the separation. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I almost didn't recognize. Sharper, steadier, but still tender beneath the surface. Ryan was there, of course. He greeted me with his usual calm confidence. "You look incredible," he said, and for once, I didn't deflect. "Thank you," I replied, meaning it. We spent most of the night mingling, but toward the end, we found ourselves outside on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The air was cold, our breaths visible in the night. "You've changed," Ryan said quietly. "Have I?" He nodded. "You carry yourself differently. Like someone who stopped waiting to be saved." I laughed softly. Maybe I finally realized no one was coming. He smiled, but his eyes were sad. Sometimes saving yourself is the most terrifying kind of courage. We stood there in silence, not the heavy silence of loss, but the calm silence of understanding. Later that night, lying in bed, I replayed Ryan's words in my head. "Stopped waiting to be saved." That was it, wasn't it? All this time I'd been waiting, for Ethan to return, for closure, for life to make sense again. But maybe it never would. Maybe I had to create my own meaning from the ashes, so I started writing again. Not for work, for myself. Journals filled with reflections, letters to Ethan I never sent, fragments of thoughts about love, forgiveness, and the quiet ways we fall apart. And as I wrote, I started seeing my story differently, and not as a tragedy, but as a transformation. One Sunday afternoon, while I was writing at a cafe, I looked up and saw a familiar figure at the counter, Ethan. He hadn't seen me yet. His hair was shorter, his face thinner. He looked human again. Not angry, not broken, just real. My heart leapt, but I didn't move. He ordered his coffee, turned, and our eyes met. For a moment, the world went silent. He hesitated, then walked toward me. Ava. Ethan. We stood there awkwardly, two people bound by history and silence. You look well, he said finally. I'm getting there. He nodded slowly. I'm glad. There was so much I wanted to say. I missed you. I still love you. I forgive you. But none of it came out. Instead, I said, How have you been? He smiled faintly, trying to figure out who I am without us. That hurt, but in a strangely beautiful way. We talked for a few minutes, about work, about the weather, about nothing and everything. Then his coffee was ready. He stood there, cup in hand, and said, I'm sorry again, Ava, for not listening. For walking away? I nodded. I'm sorry too, for not seeing how lost we were. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just whispered, Take care of yourself. And this time, I didn't cry when he walked away because maybe the point wasn't to get him back. Maybe the point was to find myself in the space he left behind. That night, as I closed my journal, I wrote one final line. Sometimes love doesn't end. It simply changes form, from holding hands to letting go. There comes a moment in every heartbreak when you think you're finally fine, and then something small, something stupid pulls you right back under. For me, it was a photograph. It was a Sunday morning, and I was cleaning out the last of Ethan's things. An old box tucked behind the closet. Inside were our honeymoon photos. There we were in Santorini, smiling like fools against the sea, the kind of happiness that felt invincible. I stared at that picture for a long time, and then without warning the tears came. Not the soft, cinematic kind, but the ugly, choking sobs that come from somewhere deep, somewhere primal. I had held it together for months. I had smiled, worked, exercised, rebuilt, but I had never grieved? Not really. I spent that day in silence, curled up on the couch, surrounded by the wreckage of a life I no longer recognized. It wasn't about Ethan anymore. Not entirely. It was about who I had become in the process of losing him. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost myself too. In the need to prove I was fine. To appear strong. To survive. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine and called my mother. She picked up on the first ring. Ava? I'm tired, Mom, I whispered. I don't even know what I'm fighting for anymore. Her voice was soft but firm. You're fighting for yourself, sweetheart. That's who's left when everyone else walks away. Her words hit me hard, because deep down I knew she was right. The next day I didn't go to work. Instead, I took a long walk through the city. No headphones, no distractions, just me and the rhythm of my own footsteps. The air was crisp, the sky pale blue. I passed the restaurant where I'd had that dinner with Ryan. It looked the same. Warm lights, polished glass, the faint hum of conversation. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or shame. Just distance. That dinner had felt like the end of my marriage, but now I saw it differently. It was the moment that began my reckoning. I kept walking until I reached the riverfront. The water shimmered under the sunlight, calm and endless. I leaned on the railing and let the wind tangle my hair. There, in that quiet moment, I let go. Not of Ethan, not yet, but of the version of myself that needed his forgiveness to feel whole. The following week, Ryan called me into his office. You've been quiet lately, he said. Is everything okay? I hesitated, then decided to be honest. No, but maybe that's a good thing. He looked puzzled. Good? I smiled faintly. I've spent months trying to convince everyone, including myself, that I'm fine. I'm not, but I'm starting to be okay with that. He leaned back in his chair. That's incredibly self-aware. I laughed softly. Or incredibly tired? He smiled. Maybe both. There was a pause, and then he said, "You know, Ava, I've always admired your strength." I looked at him, really looked. It's not strength, Ryan. It's survival. And for the first time, I said it without shame. That night, Ryan invited a few of us from work out for drinks. Normally, I'd decline, but this time I went. We talked, laughed, shared stories. I caught myself smiling, genuinely not out of habit. At one point, Ryan leaned in and said, "I'm glad you came tonight." "You seem lighter," I nodded. "Maybe I am," he smiled, that easy, confident smile that used to make me nervous. But now I just saw a man. A good man, a friend. Nothing more, and that realization felt like freedom. A few days later, I received an email from Ethan. Subject: closure. Ava, I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because I finally read your messages, all of them. Maybe because I realized I never gave you the chance to explain. I saw things in that photo that weren't really there. I made up a story in my head and treated it like truth. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. I've been seeing a therapist trying to understand why I react the way I do, how fear can disguise itself as anger. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I finally see it. Ethan, I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just breathed. Then I wrote back, "Ethan, thank you for saying that. I forgive you, truly. I hope you find peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from understanding. Take care, Ava." When I hit send, something inside me shifted, like a knot that had been tightening for months finally loosened. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I was innocent. I was simply done carrying the weight of what happened. That weekend, I drove out to Lake Michigan, the place Ethan and I used to go during our early years together. The air was sharp, the water restless. I stood at the edge of the shore, shoes in hand, and let the cold waves kiss my feet. For a moment, I imagined him there beside me, smiling, wind in his hair, that easy laugh that had once filled my world. "I loved you," I whispered into the wind. "And maybe part of me always will." The wind carried it away, and in that moment, I realized something beautiful. Loving him didn't mean I had to keep hurting. When I returned home, I started making plans. Not for anyone else, for me. I signed up for a writing retreat in the mountains. I'd always wanted to go, but life, marriage, and fear had kept me from it. Now there was nothing stopping me. I told Ryan I'd be gone for 2 weeks. He smiled and said, "You deserve it." That night, as I packed my bags, I felt something I hadn't in months. Excitement, not for escape. For rediscovery. The next morning before I left, I made one final stop, the coffee shop where I'd last seen Ethan. I ordered our usual drink, 1 caramel latte, 1 black coffee, and sat by the window. The barista asked, "Will someone be joining you?" I smiled softly. "No, not today." And as I sat there sipping my coffee, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Because somewhere between heartbreak and healing, I had found the one person I'd been missing all along, myself. That was my breaking point. And my rebirth. It's strange how healing doesn't come all at once. It arrives quietly, like dawn, soft, steady, unnoticed until you look up one day and realize the darkness has lifted. 3 months had passed since I'd sent Ethan that final message. He hadn't replied, and I didn't expect him to. But sometimes I caught myself wondering how he was doing. Not with bitterness, just curiosity. I was learning to live without the constant ache. I had moved into a smaller apartment near the lake. White walls, warm light, plants by the window. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every morning, I brewed my own coffee, played a jazz playlist, and watched the sunrise. I used to think peace meant having someone to share it with. Now I realized peace is simply not needing anyone else to complete it. The writing retreat in Colorado changed everything. The first night there, I stood on the cabin porch, surrounded by pine trees and silence so deep it felt sacred. For the first time in a long time, my thoughts weren't screaming. They were whispering, gentle, forgiving. Our instructor, a warm, silver-haired woman named Miriam, began each session by asking one question. Who are you when no one is watching? The first time she asked, I froze. I didn't know the answer, but over those 2 weeks, through words, long walks, and late-night journaling, I began to find it. I wrote about the woman I'd been before Ethan, the dreamer, the storyteller, the girl who believed in love but never stopped believing in herself. Somewhere along the way, I realized that girl wasn't gone. She was waiting. One evening, as the sun melted into gold behind the mountains, I wrote something that made me cry. I am not what was done to me. I am what I choose to become afterward. Those words stayed with me. They became my mantra. When I returned to Chicago, I printed them and taped them above my desk. Ryan noticed the change in me right away. You seem different, he said one morning in the office. Lighter, happier. I am, I replied with a smile. For the first time in a long while, I actually like who I am. He chuckled softly. That's the best thing I've heard in months. We became good friends, just that. And it was enough. I even started mentoring a few younger women in the company, teaching them how to set boundaries, how to speak up, how to protect their voices in rooms that too often tried to silence them. It felt empowering, like every scar had found a purpose. Then, one rainy evening in November, I got a message I didn't expect. It was from Ethan. Ethan. Hey, I'm in town for a conference. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. No pressure. Just to talk. My first instinct was hesitation. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe closure, said yes. We met at a small cafe downtown. When I walked in, he was already there, waiting by the window. He looked different. Older somehow. Softer. When our eyes met, he stood up, smiled nervously. Hey, I said. We sat, ordered coffee, and for a while just talked. About work, about life, about nothing in particular. It was easy in a way it hadn't been for years. Finally, he said, I need to tell you something. I nodded. I spent a long time blaming you for something that never happened. And when I realized that, it broke me, because I saw how much I destroyed, not just our marriage, but your faith in me. I said nothing, he continued, voice shaking slightly. I've been trying to rebuild myself, to understand why I couldn't trust someone who'd never betrayed me. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, Ava, for everything. I took a deep breath. Thank you. That means more than you know. He looked at me then, eyes searching. You seem different, happier, I smiled softly. I am. There was silence, comfortable this time. Then he said quietly, Do you ever think about us? I looked out the window, at the rain sliding down the glass, the world beyond it hazy and gray. Sometimes, I said honestly, but I think about what we taught each other more. He nodded slowly, understanding. We talked a bit longer, then said goodbye. No tears, no drama. Just peace. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled like new beginnings. That night, I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker like fireflies, and I smiled. Not because I had moved on from Ethan, but because I had moved back into myself. I had learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking. It means looking at the past and saying, Thank you for the lessons, but I'm walking forward now. A few months later, I finished my first short story collection. It was called The Dinner Table. Each story explored moments of misunderstanding, how small, simple things could unravel or rebuild a life. When it was published, it didn't go viral or top charts. But one night I received a message from a reader. "Your stories made me leave a toxic relationship. Thank you for helping me find my voice," I cried when I read that. Not from sadness, but from recognition. That was it. That was my purpose, to turn my pain into something that gave others strength. One spring evening, I walked along the lake again, the same path where I had once stood barefoot in the cold waves, whispering goodbye. The sky was streaked with pink and gold. The water glimmered like glass. I closed my eyes and breathed it all in. And in that quiet, I felt something like grace. The deep, unshakable kind that doesn't depend on love returned or wounds forgotten. It comes from surviving the storm and realizing you were the shelter all along. If you had told me a year ago that I would lose my marriage, my home, and still find happiness, I would have laughed through tears. But here I am, not the woman I was, not the wife I used to be. I am something new. Something whole. Something free. My name is Ava Morgan, and my husband left me because I had dinner with my boss. But in doing so, he set me free to have dinner with my own soul.